Conversations with Niki is brought to you by studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets. Welcome, Conversations with Niki. It is, and I'm Niki Seberini. I'm very happy to be with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks to our syndication partner listeners as well, and that is Bay FM in PE, Wild Coast FM, East London, Knysna FM, 90.3 MC in Plet, West Coast FM in Namibia, Kawi FM, that's Port Alfred, Chai FM, and Eldo's FM up here in Johannesburg. Thank you so much. And also I've been getting your emails, and I'm really enjoying getting your emails, and just keep them coming. And all you have to do to get hold of me is visit the website, and it's Conversations with Niki. So it's www.conversationswithniki.co.za. One word, Niki is spelled N-I-K-I. And there's a little contact page. You can just click on that contact page, and then we're in touch. And I will always respond to your mails. And thank you for the suggestions. A lot of the suggestions that you've given me will be shows for next year. So just listen out for the shows that you've been asking for. And it's not just ideas. I'd love your stories as well. So if you're willing to share stories, I'm happy to put you on the radio, because, you know, that's what it's all about. It's about a communication. It's not just me talking to you. It's about you responding and talking back. So I would love that response from you. Also, all the shows are podcasts, so you can get all the podcasts on the website. So today's show will be on the website within the next 2 days. Someone suggested a giveaway, so I contacted Tablet World, and they very, very generously have given me a tablet to give to you. Now, what's a tablet? You know these Android tablets? It's not an iPad. This is an Android tablet. It's called a Colpad. One of my guests is jumping up and down. Me, I want it. I know they're fantastic. Let me tell you, they've changed the way we do business, the way we communicate, the way we do everything. And this is called a Colpad 2. It's a 7-inch, and it works off Wi-Fi. I'm going to be giving it away end of January. So you've got a long period of time, and maybe you're wondering, well, how am I going to win this Colpad? It's very simple. All you have to do is go to my Facebook page and like it. And the Facebook page is Niki Seberini Talk Show Host. Go to the page, like it, and I'm going to be doing a draw on air at the end of January. You could win that Colpad too. Now, perhaps you are thinking about your holidays. Perhaps you're deciding where you're going to be going. A lot of people go off to the beach. Some people are lucky enough to go overseas, if some people go on holiday at all. And maybe you're thinking about going up to Mpumalanga, and if you are, I have a recommendation for you, because I'm quite a passionate advocate for conservation and animal rights, children's rights. This is what I feel very passionately about. So when I was told about Chimp Eden, that's the Jane Goodall Institute, Chimpanzee Eden, being in a little bit of trouble, they're near Barberton, well, I thought that perhaps you could assist. Maybe there's something that you could do. So I have on the line Philip Cronje, who is the sanctuary manager, just to very quickly tell us about Chimp Eden and what's happening there. So Philip, hi, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Niki. How are you doing?
Excellent, thank you. So I'm busy saying that possibly there are people coming your way over the December period, and coming along to Chimp Eden is something that they should be doing. Tell us all about it.
That's correct, Niki. We have 3 tours a day, 10, 12, and 2 o'clock, where the people are introduced to our chimps and told their stories. Basically, we're a rescue sanctuary where we rescue chimpanzees from all over Africa. So we have, at the moment, 34 chimps from various countries in Africa, like Mozambique, Central African Republic, Ghana, Sudan, where these chimps have been kept as pets, but most of the time in very bad conditions. They're chained to trees, or they're in people's backyards, and we are notified and we go out to fetch. Now, a rescue that is done can cost in excess of 50 to 100,000 rand.
Wow. That's
because we have to fly the animals, and there's a lot of other things that have to be done. We also get donations of fruit and vegetables from our local community. And in the past weeks, with the weather not being good, those have dropped. So if there are any farmers in the Nelspruit area who have surplus, we can always collect from them, because this obviously helps us. We feed approximately 120 kilograms of fruit and veg a day to the chimps. So, you know,
you're in dire need. You're in dire need, Philip.
Yeah, we basically get from Fruit and Veg City in Nelspruit and a couple of other farmers, and we've been sort of pushing the limits the last couple of weeks. Fortunately, some of the farmers have given us extra food, so it's not that the chimps are not getting food. But it's always nice to make sure that the fridge is always full.
Philip, just very quickly, I mean, going all over Africa and rescuing these chimps, is it a dangerous thing to do? I mean, going into some of these unfriendly territories?
Most of the countries are not the best countries. They're not the top tourist destination for anybody. I think the most dangerous one that I've been to was the Central African Republic, in that it holds the well-known fact that it's the country with the most violent overthrows in the world, and they kind of happen every couple of weeks, and currently there's a problem there. And we were there and rescued 2 chimps out of Central African Republic, but we didn't have too many problems. But you just never know. You're dealing in very unstable countries, so we kind of try and get in and out as quick as possible.
So all these chimps have been saved. They've been put in Chimp Eden, and it's in Nelspruit, and people can come along and they can visit and hear some of the stories. But more importantly, if anyone in the area, or if anyone knows of farmers in the area who have extra fruits and veggies, perhaps they can help out.
That's for sure. We're approximately 14 kilometers outside of Nelspruit on the Barberton Road, and we're quite easy to find, and people are welcome to come and visit us.
Fantastic, Philip. Listen, if anyone's listening and they want to help out, do you have a contact number they can reach you on?
They can contact me on my cell phone number, which is 083-231-6309.
All right. Well, listen, you know, who knows? Maybe there's someone who knows someone near your area who can help out. I certainly hope they do. And if not with that, maybe more people will come and visit you over the festive season. Thank you so much, Philip. Thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Philip Cronje, Sanctuary Manager, and that number again, 083-231-6309, Chimp Eden. I read the book about some of these chimps being saved, and it's extraordinary stories. Just wonderful that this world is filled with people who go beyond themselves all the time. And that's actually just, I suppose, a good way of introducing the show today, because while we're going to be talking about something that it's very heavy and it is a great burden that we have in our society today, there is certainly a light at the end of the tunnel, and there are people who work tirelessly to help people who are suffering, and help to try and end what is happening not only in South Africa but around the world. And I think it's very important that we have this discussion today, and it may be difficult for you to listen. It may be difficult for you to sit down and hear about what's happening, but this is not a discussion that we can walk away from, because if we walk away from it, the problem is going to get worse and worse, and our children, unfortunately, are suffering. And I'm talking about child sexual abuse. And you may be wondering why. I mean, why are we going to be talking about a subject like this on Conversations with Niki? It seems to be a weekly thing, that we're opening up papers, we're switching on televisions and radios, and we're hearing the most horrific stories of young babies being raped. There's just a story now about a 6-week-old little baby being raped by her uncle in Kimberley. And people are shaking their heads. And I wonder if we are just becoming desensitized. I wonder if we're seeing it and it's becoming so abhorrent that we switch off. We're no longer feeling. We've already developed that thick skin because it's our way of coping. And so what we do is we switch off the radio. Maybe we just switch off and we think of something else. And that's a very, very dangerous place to be. But there are people who are working and continue to work to help and to try bring an end to it. And that's why we need to have this discussion today. You know, it is the 16 days of no violence against women and children in South Africa. I just sometimes wonder how effective a campaign like that is. I mean, is it something we're just talking about? Is it a marketing campaign? Or are people actually thinking about violence against women and children during this time? I don't know how they can be if we start off this campaign with a 6-week-old baby lying in hospital and fighting for her life because she's been sexually abused by her uncle. It is a very, very sad state of affairs. And perhaps you are asking the question that I ask each and every time I hear these stories. Why? How? And I was very, well, after doing a lot of research and making a lot of phone calls, I was lucky enough to come across someone who was asking the very same question, and she took it a lot further, and she did a whole lot of research on it, and in fact wrote a thesis on the why and the how. So I'd like to introduce my first guest today. That is Dr. Amelia Kleijn, who's a social worker, and she wrote a thesis on men who rape babies and young children. So Dr. Kleijn, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Niki.
So the why and the how. Let me ask you the why and how first. Why did you decide to dedicate a period of your time to delving deep into something that is so dark and abhorrent? Why did you do it?
Niki, the study was triggered after the rape of an infant in the Northern Cape in October 2001 who was dubbed Baby Tsepang. And at the time it was incorrectly reported that 6 men had in fact raped this infant. Subsequent DNA evidence proved that this was not so, and it was the boyfriend of the 16-year-old mother. At the time there was an absolute media furor, both in South Africa and beyond, that suggested these acts only happened in South Africa, only started after 1994, and were a response to the so-called virgin cleansing myth, whereby sex with a virgin would protect and possibly even cure AIDS. All of those statements are completely incorrect. These acts happen all over the world, and they've been happening, ever since people roamed the earth. And there is conflicting evidence as regards the role of HIV and AIDS in these acts. The virgin cleansing myth, by the way, is not new, and it is most certainly not unique to South Africa. I then took it upon myself to try and understand the why, and I then spent 7 years finding 10 men within our prisons who had been convicted of the rape of children under the age of 10, under the age of 3, I beg your pardon, and really getting up close and very personal with them to try and understand their life stories and the factors in their lives that might have led them to commit such violent acts.
How did you find them?
Perfectly normal. And this is where the media needs to...
So you're not looking at a person who you'd think, this looks like a...
No.
I mean, this looks like a dangerous person.
No,
I've got to get away.
the media often report, these men as monsters. Well, I don't know about you, but I associate a monster, who leaves a trail of slime and might have very strange-looking ears. Their acts are monstrous, but they themselves are not monstrous. But the one feature that was common to all of them was this extraordinary lack of empathy. These are very, very damaged human beings. And these men didn't just wake up and think, oh, today's a good day to go and do X. This was years and years of the most appalling maltreatment that culminated in this incredibly violent action.
So what did you find interviewing 10 of them? That they all had similar backgrounds?
Yes, they did. Very similar. Their backgrounds were almost templates of each other.
Oh, really?
In that they all came from profound poverty, but I want to revisit that in a minute.
Okay.
Inherent in that poverty were serious problems pardon me, with parental care and parental supervision. When young children don't connect, or what we call attach, to a primary caregiver, that can set up problems, particularly in adult life. So these children never really had a mom that they could get close to, because mom was often, or always in fact, subjecting these children to extremely high levels of beatings. What I as a social worker would call physical abuse.
Really, Dr. Kleijn?
Yeah, we're talking beatings with shambox, where children were left black and blue, with shoes, with handbags. Teachers were also beating 8 of the men who went to school with metal rulers, with car fan belts, a piece of broomstick, and so it went on. So that in every area of their lives, they were beaten, be it at home, in the school, by members of the community, by extended family members, and so it went on. When people live in poverty and in very, very overcrowded conditions, it also means that children get to see things that children shouldn't. So these children often witnessed adult sexual activity, and we know that that has a profound effect on a developing child, witnessing that kind of thing. And more crucially, these children witnessed a lot of violence where moms were beaten up by dads or by boyfriends. And there is a growing body of research, mine included, that demonstrates very clearly children who witness that kind of violence will grow up and become abusive adults themselves.
Why? Is it because it's seen as acceptable behavior? Is that how it's processed?
Children, one of the ways children learn is by watching. We call it social learning theory. And children then act that out. And in the absence of a positive role model to say, hang on a minute, this is not how we behave, children will then accept that as normal. And if you have violence on every level of your life, violence starts becoming normal. It starts becoming part of your life. So these children started bullying. But bullies are clever because they will always pick on someone where they're going to beat the fight. You'll never see a bully picking on someone bigger. Some of these men also abused animals in horrible ways. So it's no surprise that by the time these men were adults, the world to them was a terrible place. They had a string of disastrous intimate relationships, a lot of one-night stands. All of them were unemployed for at least 2 years at the time that they committed these crimes. And we know that alcohol abuse is highest amongst the unemployed for the simple reason there's nothing else to do, and it does take away the pain. And for a man to be unemployed is devastating. Because of the way society is structured, we still live in a very patriarchal society where men are perceived as the breadwinners. And when men can't meet those demands, they get very, very angry. Now, the point I want to make, all of these things in no way excuse the behavior of what these men then did. I did my study with the sole intention of trying to understand the why, because if we understand the why, we can perhaps do something about it. Okay. So yeah, if you have maltreated children, they will grow up into maltreated adults and behave like this because they knew no better.
Okay, so let me ask you this. I'm sure that people listening right now have grown up in situations where they were abused in one way or another. Perhaps there wasn't a lot of money. Maybe they were exposed to sexual activity between adults. Maybe they were exposed to that. But they are not going out and raping babies.
Niki,
is there not a switch? Is there not something wrong with these people? I understand the background, I understand, but we could gather 100 of them into this.
There are two things to that. One is these men have the features of what we call conduct disorder during childhood and what we call antisocial personality behavior or psychopaths in adult life. Okay. The marker of any psychopath is no empathy. And these babies and infants were seen as objects. They weren't seen as little people who have the same rights and feelings that you and I have. Having said that, the counter-argument of why many men don't rape is equally important. Because I can almost guarantee it, someone is going to phone and say, but my dad beat me and I don't run around raping women. Absolutely. We are not saying that if you are beaten you are going to become a rapist. This is a very complex crime with very complex causes that are associated with it. But when I speak to men who come from very similar backgrounds, and there are millions of them in South Africa and beyond, and they haven't grown up to become violent and abusive adults, somewhere along the line there is a positive role model who takes that child and says, hang on a minute, we don't hit our little sister, we don't try and hit mommy. Let's talk about the fight you've just witnessed outside of Shebeen. What's going on here? This is not acceptable behavior. And one of the tragedies of so-called modern living and progress is the breakdown of families and communities, where we don't see these hierarchical role models, particularly males, because older males are very, very influential on growing boys' development. But you know, in urbanization, in globalization and so on, we've seen the erosion of sort of 3 or even 4 generations of family that are fairly accessible in that they all live in the same area, or that, you know, the breakdown of the family is affecting all generations, and there are problems associated with alcoholic behavior, violence, substance abuse and so on. But I cannot emphasize how important those positive role models are. If you were to sit down with a high-risk child and you could tick all the boxes for problems during childhood, during adolescence, during adult life, and you had one person who could just take that child under his proverbial wing, wow, the world would be a much better place. It really would.
Dr. Kleijn, let me ask you, these 10 men that you then questioned, and you said there was no empathy, there was no remorse. Did they look back? Did they realize that what they had done was wrong?
No. They had a very good way of shifting the responsibility to somebody else, and that's also a marker of antisocial personality disorder, where, you know, it was the mother's fault. I was angry because my cattle were stolen, therefore it was okay for me to take it out on my 2-year-old neighbor.
So is it taking out on? Is it an
about
act?
Revenge.
It's an act of anger.
It's about revenge, it's about anger, and also included in that is a sense of complete powerlessness that these men had prior to them committing these rapes. You know, they were unemployed. We talk about the cycle of poverty. All these men, you know, shared this with me in great detail. I remember there was one man telling me he shared a room with 8 other people, and the room was so small, the only way they could make it work was they slept in the order that each person had to leave in the morning to go and try and find work, or for those who had jobs to go to work. Some of them had been drinking beforehand, some hadn't. And there would be a minor provocation, okay? But if you grow up in the world without developing resilience, you know, the world throws knocks at every single one of us. It's called life. But these men just didn't have the capacity to deal with it because of their childhoods, because of that maltreatment. It's very unlikely when children are maltreated that they will build sufficient resilience to cope with the world. And then one day something happens. Cattle get stolen. There's a fight with an uncle. There's a fight with a sister, sibling rivalry. And then these men strike. These acts are completely opportunistic. They are completely without premeditation.
No planning.
No, not at all.
This is an impulse.
No. This is what makes them very different from pedophiles. Okay,
well,
pedophiles plan.
Well, this is what I wanted to bring in, because a pedophile, I mean, you're looking at a person who is sexually attracted to young children, and it's very specific. They'll like a particular look, a particular age, and there's a whole grooming process that takes place. And this is a show about sexual abuse, so we're looking at you know, these sexual offenders that you interviewed, but we're also talking about pedophiles. But these men who went and raped these young children, and it was a response, and it was an act, they were feeling powerless, and it was an act of revenge and anger, but there had to have been a sexual arousal in order to do this act. This is what I can't quite grasp.
One of the men actually admitted that he had to, shall we say, give himself a little help before he could rape the child.
Okay.
It is anger that manifests itself sexually.
Is this the same type of anger that you would see in soldiers, for example, during war?
Absolutely.
Is it the same kind of arousal?
Because rape since the year dot has been used as a tactic of war against men, women and children. That is not new. It's quite a difficult thing to understand, but you know, in the same way that a 90-year-old grandmother is not sexually appealing, neither is a 3-month-old infant.
Can they be rehabilitated?
Psychopath? Sure, unlikely. You can't medicate a lack of empathy. These are profoundly dysfunctional, personality disordered human beings. You would need a highly, highly skilled team of professionals to intervene. In the same way that you can't really rehabilitate a pedophile, would need the same kind of approach. We call it cognitive behavioral therapy, of which I'm not trained to conduct. As I say, it's a very skilled intervention. And all you can, one of the things you can do is to teach these men the importance that they are never, ever left alone with a young child on their own. But their prognosis is not good because they are so damaged. The damage is very, very deep. It's very deep. And these men, whether we like it or not, they are products of our society. We are a very, very violent country. We've come out of 300 years of colonial rule. We've had 50 years of apartheid. Just look at the level of aggression on the roads. That's how it's playing itself out. Okay, we have one of the highest reported rates of rape in the world for a country that is not at war. Okay, I think we're only beaten by the DRC at the moment, and as I'm sure you're aware, there's a very nasty civil war going on in the east of that country. And it's important to remember that baby rape is kind of a subsect, if you like, of the overall appalling rates of sexual violence against men, women and children in South Africa. And I believe we are a very damaged society. Our history has left us damaged.
Well, it's disconcerting if you're looking at, based on your research, the role that poverty plays, although that's not necessarily the precursor, because you can have very little, but you can have a very supportive, loving environment that you can come from. But we're talking about parental care, lack of. You're talking about beatings, lack of a role model. And if we just look at South Africa and we see how prevalent that is within our society, it's very scary, because we kind of point fingers at the police and we say, what are you doing? But how can you change a society? How do you change a society, Dr. Kleijn? Is there an end to this? Is there an end?
I think there is, but I don't think it's going to be in my lifetime. We have to start working with children now who are under the age of 5. And we have to start teaching them about rights and responsibilities. Okay? And it's got to be a massive thing. And we need a huge amount of positive role models to do this. But from government down. Okay, government, provincial leaders, community leaders, teachers. We know what's happening in some of our schools. There've been some shocking incidents in the media of teachers who have behaved very inappropriately, as there have been of pupils who are behaving very inappropriately in schools. But we need to inculcate into every single South African, every human being is a role model to an impressionable child. That's what we have to do. We have to work with parents and help them understand other ways of disciplining their children. I'm not saying children must be without discipline. That is not what I'm saying. But I think sadly there are some sectors of our society who equate discipline and punishment. They are two different things. Okay? And we've got to find other ways of disciplining our children that don't involve a big stick. And critically, we need fathers to assume those responsibilities.
I think it's one of the biggest problems.
We've had
no fathers.
We've had recent research that suggests over 60% of children in South Africa grow up without fathers. What kind of generation are we going to have in the next 10 to 15 years' time? It boggles belief. But we mustn't forget that many of the abusers are also fathers. Okay? Most abuse is committed by someone known to that child or who is close to that child for the simple reason of access. So at the same time, men also need a huge amount of support, because ironically, even though we remain a very patriarchal society in many instances, if you look at legislation, okay, we have a National Women's Day, we have 16 days activism, women, children, blah, blah, but where's the stuff for the men? And I think
that's a good point.
Yeah, sometimes feel quite marginalized in this country. And, you know, dads need help. Parenting is the toughest job in the world, but it comes with no how-to manual and no license.
Too true, Dr. Kleijn. We're gonna take a break, and after the break we're going to talk to Trish Heslop, the Executive Director of the Guild Cottage, and we have someone who actually went through the Guild Cottage who's going to be sharing her story with us, and that is Sharon. So we're looking at the findings of Dr. Klein's thesis, and you know, it isn't all just doom and gloom, because, as I said, there are people out there who are working tirelessly to try and turn things around and to help young children who have gone through this process. So let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is S.V. Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Well, if you have just tuned in, welcome, welcome. It's Conversations with Niki, and I am Niki Seberini. It's great to be with you. Welcome our syndication partner listeners. That's Eldos FM, Chai FM, Kawi FM, West Coast FM, 90.3 MC, Neisner FM, Wild Coast, and did I say Wild Coast? West Coast and Bay FM. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're having an interesting discussion today. Interesting because Dr. Kleijn was sharing her thesis and the findings of the research that she did, asking the question, why do men rape babies? And if you had been listening to the first half hour, you would see that the way children are brought up has a huge effect on how they play out later on in life. Do they have role models? Do they have a mother and a father? What kind of relationships do they have with their parents? Do they come from an impoverished background? Dr. Kleijn, one thing I didn't ask was education, level of education as well, and also beatings. And these are all things that contribute to, of the 10 men that Dr. Kleijn interviewed, to them going and raping babies. And these are men who have absolutely no empathy, and there's no remorse whatsoever. So we've been talking about these very interesting findings, and now we're going to move on and look at, there's so many organizations and there's so many people who are doing wonderful things, but quite close to home is the Guild Cottage. And the Guild Cottage it's a home that, it's an NGO, and they provide refuge and rehabilitation for children who have gone through abuse. And I have in the studio Trish Heslop, who is the Executive Director of the Guild Cottage. Trish, thank you very much for taking time out and for joining us.
Thank you, Niki.
And for being instrumental in helping me put this show together, because we had coffee not so long ago and we were just talking about how important it was. So thank you for that, Trish. Thank you. And we've got Sharon, who is very brave to come onto the show today, because Sharon has had her experiences of abuse. And Sharon went to the Guild Cottage, and she's moved on, and that's why Sharon's sharing her story, because it's a story of hope, really, and encouragement, but it's not easy. It's not easy to sit here and share a story like that. So Sharon, thank you very much.
Thanks, Niki.
Thanks for coming onto the show. So Trish, just if you can tell us, the Guild Cottage, tell us a little bit more about what you do.
It's not a children's home in the sense that we all understand. It's a treatment center for sexually abused children. We can only take 18 children at any one time, which is kind of sad when there are over 4 million sexually abused children in South Africa under the age of 16. We are the only dedicated place like this in South Africa. It's residential treatment where children are removed from the situation that's dangerous, and they are put through a 4-stage process that we run. The one is therapy, obviously. Every child gets at least an hour of therapy every week, in which they can work out what has happened to them, how they are not to blame for it. Children always come in with huge sense of guilt about what's happened. We have family work that we do extensively. If the child has a family, we work with their family to show them how they could have kept their child safe, how they will in future when the child is returned, because obviously what we try to do is get kids back to their families. And that's been a really successful program, because when we do the in-home work, we do it with a larger system. So we bring in neighbors, teachers, the pastor, whoever else, and it's a hugely educational program. And a lot of the abuse has been shown in research to lessen in an area once you do the education of the larger system. And we've had young men come and say, I wish I'd known what I was doing to my sister, my neighbor, because I didn't understand the impact of what I was doing. And then the other piece we do is what we call life space, and I think that's almost the most important thing. It's normalizing a child into a situation where they feel safe. Therapy can only happen when a child feels safe. And there's consistency of response to their behaviors. Of course, kids come in with huge behavior problems when they are so angry with what's happened to them. And they act out. Girls act out, boys act out. Girls sometimes become very depressed and internalize a lot of their anger. But nevertheless, they all need special handling. Every one of them is an individual needing to be recognized for who they are and what they're trying to deal with. And then we've also discovered recently education is huge. A lot of the kids, and I'm thinking of a child we had, she was brought to us from a shelter, and she had scars as thick as my finger across her head because she had reported to the school that Mom's latest boyfriend was sexually abusing her. And when the school sent somebody to go and look, the mother pretended the child wasn't there and she'd sent her away. So the child was kept out of school for a couple of years. This is usual because teachers are often the first person that gets told when sexual abuse is happening within a family. And exactly as Amelia said, more than 70% of child sexual abuse in this country is incest. It's within the family. And even though incest has a slightly wider definition than it used to have, it includes people that the child knows well. Over 70%.
Frightening.
And we're talking about safety in homes. Home and school should be a safe place, but we are also now getting figures that 25% of kids between the age of 10 and 14 who are sexually abused are abused by their school teachers, which is devastating.
So all of these people who are supposed to be providing shelter and protection to these children are the ones who are harming them. Parents, teachers. It's a huge problem. I'm going to ask you, Dr. Kleijn, I mean, through your research and through your experience, what are the chances of a child who has been abused, sexually abused? Because we read in lots of literature that a lot of the abusers have been abused themselves. Is this true?
You can make a distinction between children who are sexually abused. Without intervention, about a third of them in all likelihood will grow up and become what we call pedophiles. Children who are subjected to physical abuse tend to become very violent rapists. I mean, no way implying that pedophilia isn't violent, of course it is. But children who are subjected to a lot of beating become particularly nasty offenders. And those are your rapists, those are your murderers, those are the people who break into your house and aren't happy with just taking your TV, but they need to do dreadful things to your family. If intervention is undertaken early enough, the child most certainly has a much better prognosis than if nothing is done at all, because you need to break those patterns of behavior.
So the Guild Cottage, I mean, what they're offering and hearing all of these stages of treatment, is this something that, I mean, you spoke about these men and that they, you know, they became psychopaths eventually, but this kind of intervention at the right age can turn a situation around completely.
It's the only or the most powerful tool we have right now in our fight against child abuse, is to stop children who've been hurt themselves from growing up and doing exactly the same thing when they're older. So their work in other organizations like them is absolutely critical.
So it begs the question, why is there only one treatment center like yours in the whole of South Africa?
The government departments of welfare tell us we're expensive because we employ professionals. Not that they fund us. I mean, the funding we get from the department, and every child is a ward of the state. But for looking after these wards of the state, the government give us approximately, this year it's about 22% of our costs. So
how do you raise the rest of the money?
I've become very good at begging. You know, we have to look in all directions for funding.
I mean, when you look at, as you said, there are how many? 4 million?
4 million was
of children in South Africa have been raped, and you can only, with your kind of treatment, and Dr. Klein's talking about being rehabilitated, only 14 children are coming through.
I must say that of the 4 million, there are children in families that can afford to send them to a psychologist to have some therapy. The children that we get, obviously, because we can only take 18, are the children who have suffered the worst abuse.
Okay.
The newspaper story children. Those are the kids who often come to us. We are seeing in the last 10 years unbelievable and very traumatic abuse. Things that we would never have thought would happen to children is happening now.
And how do you deal with that, working with that every single day? I mean, you have a greater purpose and a greater passion, but really, how is that?
We have a very supportive team of professionals. We do a fair amount of trauma debriefing amongst ourselves, and if any of us feel the need, we can get access to somebody who will do trauma debriefing with us, because we need it. It's painful work, and it's made doubly painful when you're worrying about dressing children nicely, because a lot of these kids come from very poor backgrounds who come to us, and we can't let them go to school looking like orphan children. So this is where the begging comes in. We're constantly trying to normalize these children. We've just been given a very nice grant for the December holidays, so our kids can go to the pantomime, go to Gold Reef City, do the kind of normal things,
wonderful.
Have fun things, go to KFC and watch a movie. These are things that normalize the children, because a lot of the kids tell us that they don't want to go out into public because they feel they've got a big V for victim on their foreheads, and everybody will recognize them as having been victims of abuse. So it is difficult. It's certainly worthwhile. We talk about baby steps, but then we have wonderful people like Sharon who come back to us over and over again, and we're so proud of our graduates.
Well, that's when I'd like to bring Sharon in. I think it's a perfect time to bring Sharon in. Sharon, how old were you when you went to the Guild Cottage?
I was 12 years old by the time when I joined Guild Cottage.
And how did you get there? What were the circumstances? And I know that this is difficult, so answer what you can, and we can move forward if there's anything that you're not happy to discuss.
Thank you. I was a victim, one of the victims actually at the time of rape, and my family was not supportive enough. They were not supporting. They made me feel like I was. So it was all my fault.
So you were raped when you were 12 years old?
I was raped when I was 11.
You raped when you were 11, and you went to your parents and they didn't support you? I
had my family around me, but they were not supportive. Everybody made me feel like it was my fault until I was thrown into the streets. Yes, in the streets.
Did you feel like it was your fault after you had been told? You felt?
When you're a child, what you're told you believe. As she said, if you put a child in a violent environment, what they see is what they believe.
Right.
So they told me that it was my fault. I believed it. But somebody older or who I looked up to told me that it was my fault.
Now, this person who raped you, did you know this person?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Because we're talking about, okay, so you knew the person, and then you were out on the streets. What happened there, Sharon?
I was out in the streets, and somebody from the teddy bear clinic saw me in the streets, and they took me to the teddy bear clinic, where I was directed to Guild Cottage.
And when you were on the streets, what were you left to do? I mean, did you have money? Could you put a roof over your head? Could you eat? Could you? At the age of 12, you were helpless.
I was helpless. We had to depend on the food from the dustbins. And since I was told that I was garbage, whatever anybody that I came across did to me, it was fine, because I was told that it was my fault. So I deserved what had happened to me. Did
they tell you it was your fault because it was someone that you knew and they didn't want to face that it could be something a lot bigger?
Yes, they made it all. They were trying to justify the case.
Why this person raped you?
Yes. And
your parents, when you were in the street, where were they? Did they know where you were? Were they concerned about you at all?
I don't think so. It was just like the shame was removed from their face.
Okay, so they didn't have to deal with that once you were there.
If a rape happens upon the families, to them it's like shame. It's an embarrassment. What would the community think about us?
I hear you.
So they just moved me out of the puzzle, and then they were perfect again. So I found my new family, Guild Cottage, where I was introduced to the people, the adults again. I'm seeing these new adults in my life. They tell us, we love you. I said, you love me? But the previous adults in my life, they were abusive. They didn't love me. And you're telling me I was very violent. I've got my hand to prove the violence. I even broke my hand, and the staff members knows. because of the violence.
You were. And Trish, so tell us, I mean, when Sharon arrived, tell us what it was like. Do you remember that?
I remember every child who comes to us, and I remember every child's history, and I get very emotional hearing Sharon talk about this, because I look at this beautiful young woman now, and I know how she presented to us. She was a very angry child. She had no family support at all, and yet she was obviously a very troubled child with a great deal of depth of feeling. And we had to work very hard with her. The broken hand and the broken nose was, I totally sympathized with Sharon, the staff member who got the broken nose deserved it, but but slowly Sharon made her way, and she's always been very smart. She was very determined, and I think I don't know that we were all such wonderful role models, but we all cared about these children. We all cared deeply about the children who come to us. And Sharon, and I'm not meaning this badly, she was no more special than anybody else. Everybody, and that's, I suppose, the benefit of a small situation, is that you can individualize these children, love them as individuals and for who they are, and then work at their specific problems. And Sharon was so verbal and so willing to understand what had happened. And she's just always been an absolute dynamo in changing her own life. You know, we can only offer so much.
Absolutely. So Sharon, I mean, when you arrived at the Guild Cottage, and there are all these people and there are other children who have also come from abusive backgrounds, I mean, what was the first thought that crossed your mind? Did you think, why am I here? Did you think, oh, thank God I'm here, I like these people? Or did you just want to be left alone?
At first I was relieved that I had shelter over my head, because it wasn't easy sleeping in the streets. When I started receiving the love, I started warming up to the people.
It took a long time.
Was it difficult to receive the love? You talk about not having that from your own family, and then all of a sudden having these people who are loving you and looking at you like a person. Was that difficult in the beginning?
It was first accepting it, like receiving it. Suppose you think that they are giving me this love. What will they need? What will
in
they
return
want from me?
Yeah.
So I took it with resentment. But as I went through my problem, and I learned that it wasn't my fault, and I chose to be the victor of what had happened, I decided that, yeah, I can look past what had happened and build a future, and that all it depended on me.
How long did that take?
It took me about 6 years, 4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
This is the question that I'm going to ask. Is this a slow process? Is it something that you talk about and you go for therapy and you talk to other children as well? Is there one moment when it hits you and you realize, or is it just something that happens and then you slowly start to realize it, and that just becomes your belief system? How was it for you?
That you can work through. Sometimes you feel like when you're sitting there and you see something, it triggers you. You need somebody that you can trust around you. And if I see Trish around, Trish, something like this happened to me, what do I do in situations like this? We always had that support on standby, and they made it normal for us. It was fine for us to feel that way.
Okay.
So they were very supportive, and I'm happy that I'm here where I am today.
And Sharon, how long were you at the Guild Cottage?
I was at the Guild Cottage for 6 years.
For 6 years, okay.
Yes.
And you went to school and you had the treatment and everything while you were there?
The very first time I went to a cinema was through Guild Cottage. I'd never seen a big screen before. And then through the love of our mothers, we had to go to the
our
cinema
mothers.
and everything. Yes, these are my family.
Trish is sitting here with very damp-looking eyes. Trish, you're so emotionally attached to this, and as you say, you have to be.
Well, I think you've just heard some of Sharon's story. I know just how big that story is, and I know how brave she's been. And you know, every child works through the program at their own rate, and we found that children who are smarter do better. They're more willing to understand and take on things. And once the resentment, and that was a good word to use, once the resentment of these people all running around pretending that they know what's wrong and how to fix it, once that resentment passes, it's just all go for whoever is there. And it's about understanding, it's about managing it, it's about putting it behind you. And Sharon's been just exemplary at doing that.
I'm interested, Trish, because when these children come in, you're dealing with the trauma, you're dealing with everything, and you're building them up. We spoke about the importance of role models. I mean, Dr. Kleijn was just talking about this. So you've got all these wonderful people who are working there. Are there role models? Are there people who then come in and give them ideas about what's out there, opportunities?
Yeah.
You know, have dreams for yourself about where you want to go, or are you just really dealing with the here and now?
Part of the normalizing is exactly that. And, you know, most of us, we go every day, we do what we need to do. And I know I had another girl who said to me, I've never had anyone in my life who worked. They didn't understand the concept of getting up every morning and going to work or going to school. And, you know, that was something that just didn't figure in their lives. And exactly like Amelia said, every one of our children is an attachment disordered child. Every one of them hasn't had someone in the first 3 years of their lives who are dedicated to looking after that child. And, you know, they always say that every child needs at least one person who adores them unconditionally, which is usually a parent role. And when there isn't the parent providing that, and, you know, we get a lot of our children because mum disappears, dad's not around, mum leaves the child while she goes to work or looks for a job with a neighbor, but neighbor wants to do something else, so leaves the child with her son wants to go and play, so leaves the child with someone else, and this is where the abuse happens. I was in Ivory Park about 2 weeks ago, and at midday on the streets, there are 3, 4 and 5-year-old children and 20, 25-year-old men. The unemployed, the poverty, and nobody supervising the children.
Dr. Kleijn, you're shaking your head. I mean, that's just, I think, a common occurrence. I mean, this is happening all the time.
It is, because one of the questions I asked to the 10 men, or asked of the 10 men who participated in my study, was around how they access such young children. I mean, the youngest was 3 months old. And a lot of it, you know, was appalling parental supervision. There was one incident of one man who had been drinking very heavily in a shebeen. And he reported that the men he was drinking with made very crude comments about his mother's genitalia, and he left the shebeen. He said he was angry. And he walked outside and he saw a 2.5-year-old walking down the street. This 2.5-year-old was unattended, which was how he managed to pull her into the bushes and rape her. There was another man who'd had a serious binge drinking session with the parents of a 13-month-old, and whilst they were in a drunken stupor, he removed that infant from between the parents and raped her in the same room where these parents were out for the count because of drunken stupor, and they didn't react. They were too intoxicated. So it's those kinds of things that highlight the importance of proper parental supervision. That, you know, it's not only about does your child have enough to eat. Where is your child? Who
Well,
is with
the Dipsloot cousins that were raped and murdered, that I think there was the huge outcry because people were asking the questions. Where's the mother? Where's the supervision?
And they'd been left alone on the street while the mothers had gone to the spaza shop or something, with nobody supervising those children. And it is known, I know people who live in Dipsloot, and they've told me, it is known that there are gangs of men who put each other up to this sort of activity. And when you leave your child alone, you're almost opening the door to it. So it is difficult. And, you know, I mean, a lot of our children now, when I say they're more abused than they were 10 years ago, a lot of our children were prostituted by their mothers as 2- and 3-year-olds. And one little girl we had, she was about 7, her earliest memory was being prostituted by her mum, being in a bed with mother, whoever the man was, and herself, and this man having sex with her and the mum. This was her earliest memory. I know what your earliest memory was. Mine was perhaps a new puppy or something.
That is just terrific.
And that goes on. And when Sharon talks about feeling guilty, these children will always feel guilty because that's a common thing in children. They always, which the psychopathic personalities do, is make these people feel that they can't be responsible for what I did to the child. The child maybe did something to bring it on. And I had a private
blame
practice
you were talking
with,
about.
I had a private practice with adults who'd been sexually abused as children. And this one girl was sexually abused from the age of 6 until 18 by a cousin who lived in her home. And her parents wouldn't listen to her. And that's the thing about attachment disordered children as well. Nobody listens to them. And they know that nobody will listen to these children. Somehow the antenna of these men is there.
They go for the vulnerable.
And they go for the vulnerable. And you know, we're talking about men who sexually abuse, because I know this was the subject of Amelia's thesis. But women also sexually abuse. Not to the same extent, but women also sexually abuse. And boys are also sexually abused. I think the number is 1 in 3 girls under the age of 16, 1 in 5 boys under the age of 16. So the abuse is happening out there. And while we talk about rape as being highest in the world, our sexual abuse is now of children is now also the highest in the reporting world. I don't know what's happening in places like the Central African Republic or those countries. But it is absolutely horrendous. And this bullying that turns into a conduct disorder, there's a person in Norway who's done a lot of studying of bullying, although that's not an issue in Norway. And he said bullying is directly related to violence in a society.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with him more.
Yeah. So, you know, this should give us all pause for thought.
Sharon, let me ask you, leaving the Guild Cottage after 6 years of treatment, you talk about my mothers, so you have this extended family. Was it difficult going out and making something of yourself?
When I finished my therapy session, Guild Cottage gave me my own room accommodation. They trained me on how to behave when I go to the adult world. I first moved in with my friend and tested the waters. And I wanted nothing to do with my family. I told anger towards my family by the time. And trust me, with the Guild Cottage equipped me, I was ready. I found myself a job. I could pay my own rent and I could take care of myself without the expectation that the world owed me for what had happened.
Right.
I chose to walk upright.
To walk upright and make something of your life.
Yes.
And your family, I'm interested. Are you in touch with your family?
Yes. As time goes on, you realize that yes, it's happened in the past. That's who they are, it's happened. We spoke about it. Why did they? And they justified it and said, okay, I forgive them. Since you can't erase what's happened in the past, rather leave it in the past and make the better tomorrow.
And when you're sitting here and you have been directly affected, we're talking about it, about, you know, what's happening in South Africa. We're talking about the house, how shocking it is. How do you feel when you hear us talking about this and you have experienced this firsthand?
I feel very upset right now, because most parents, though, don't want to take the responsibility of grooming their kids. They always shift the blame to somebody. If a child messes up at school, it's the teacher's fault. What are you as a parent doing about it? It's the government's fault. And most kids here are being taught about their rights, but they don't know their responsibilities. South Africa allows the kids to loiter the streets during school hours. Tomorrow, what will become of those children? Somebody is not taking responsibility, and parents should start taking responsibility of their kids.
Well, it's just what we're saying now with all of these unattended children, and you, as you say, you look at the bigger picture, and someone should be taking responsibility. Sharon, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your story. Thank you so much. And Dr. Kleijn, I mean, you right at the beginning, before we even started the interview, I said to you, you know, this is hopeless. How can we ever fix it? And you said, no, something can be done. And you're quite adamant about it.
I can, but we have to have will to do so on every level in this country. And there has to be a major mind shift. You know, Uganda, for example, a country that is far less a resource than we are, turned the tide of the HIV infection rate because there was a massive will to do so, and at every opportunity from, you know, the country's president down, safer sex and so on was discussed quite openly. And that's the sort of thing I believe we need to see happening in South Africa, that from senior government, political, whatever leaders, down to, you know, a Stockville group, a Sunday school group, that people who are in positions of power over children talk about why abuse is not a good thing, okay, and how we protect our children. But we've got to have a massive mind shift. Every time there's a rape, I'm inundated with requests, and you know, castrating people and putting them in jail is not going to stop it. We've got to work with children now, and we've got to work with communities.
Go to the root,
exactly.
The root.
We've got to work with communities about ways of disciplining their children, why corporal punishment is so dangerous in the long term, and we need to support men to be the best fathers that they can be.
Well, you said a little bit earlier, it's not going to happen in your lifetime, and I put my hands together and hope and pray that it will be in your lifetime.
Niki, I so hope I'm
I so hope so. But I thank the three of you for coming into the studio. Thank you, Trish. Thank you, Dr. Kleijn. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for sharing stories and expertise, and thank you for listening and for holding strong, because it's not an easy topic, but we need to talk about it. We need to make changes. So thank you. Please tune in again next week. It has been a pleasure. From me, Niki Seberini. Until next week, goodbye.
Hi, my name is Esvia Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Conversations with Niki was brought to you by Studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets.